Good morning, YouTube fans. This is Charles Tyler from the Charles Tyler Show. I'm just once again popping out another video for more information about Brazil in particularly, and also living abroad. Today's show is going to be based on the Brazilian Real, which I call the Brazilian Reais. And the dollar amount versus the U.S. dollar amount versus the Brazilian Real. Okay, now what I want to put out here is, like I said, I've always been looking at all the comments on our Facebook group page, Afro American Men versus Afro Brazilian Women Would You Date? And I always see a lot of brothers, get in contact with me or they mention it on the group that they want to move to Brazil. Okay, which is great. I want that to happen. I want that is my ultimate goal as well. Okay, but you got to know how the currency down there works. And you also got to know how to master our currency versus their currency. Right now, the US dollar, as you can see here, is worth 25, I mean, it's worth $2.25 versus the Brazilian reais, so the Brazilian real. Okay, in other words, for every one American dollar, it's $2.25 real. Okay, and I wanted to give a breakdown on how you can take advantage of the U.S. dollar's currency value, right as it is now, or what it may be later on. Now, the beautiful part about the U.S. dollar for a change is, because especially after the way George Bush butchered it, okay, and Obama's trying to bring it back up, is that it still has double value in Brazil. Okay, now of course you can't use the U.S. dollar in Brazil. All right, you can only trade the currency. Okay, all right, and of course you can always trade the currency at the airport, or they have in Copacabana in particular, they have a bunch of places that you can go to where you can trade your currency. Anywhere where tourists um, basically are is a currency exchange down there in Brazil, and particularly Rio de Janeiro. All right. Now, what I want to put out here is, and I want to show here, is the value of one passive income. And you notice I've been saying that a lot. All right. If you're working online and you're an American, you're getting paid American currency online. Like I said, you can basically travel or spend time in any country you want to be at, and particularly in this case, Brazil. Okay. When I was in Brazil, back in from 2012 to 2013. The exact dates were from November of 2012 to March of 2013. I was working online and I was making a pretty decent amount of money. But I always kept my eye on the value of the U.S. dollar. So, for example, when I was the U.S. dollar was a lot more than what it is now as far as its value towards Brazil. All right, when I was there, it was 245 for every one U.S. dollar. Okay, but now let's just say for kicks, when I was making about $700 a week on my online business, that came out to a little bit more than this, but let's just say for kicks now, that came out to 1578 reais or real. Okay, and keep in mind the average Brazilian who is on minimum wage in Brazil is 900 reais or real. 900 reais or real a month, not a week, not every 2 weeks, a month. Okay, well, as you can see here, $700 I made in 1 week online is now 1,500 reais. Okay, all right. Now let's just see what I made in a month in Brazil. Okay, let's just say we stuck with the $700 and we did that. We made that amount for just about a month here. If you can bear with me here, my computer's acting a little crazy. All right, but let's just say I did 2,800. Okay, that is over 6,300 reais a month. Okay, considering your expenses in Brazil, all right, the main expense probably in Brazil will be your room and basically your apartment, your flat. Okay, if the way they say it. Okay, um, the average flat price in a good neighborhood, I say between Lapa or Ipanema or Gloria. All right, you'll see about around anywhere between 900 US dollars to about 900 US dollars, anywhere between 700 to 900 US dollars a month. All right, that averages out to 1,500 to 2,100 reais a month. Okay, so if you get that out the way, all right, and let's just say we drop 2,000 of that reais, which is represented by $900, you're still going to come out to about, you're still going to still come down to about, after everything's all said and done, with your flat rent and everything like that, 4,000 reais a month. Okay, all right, and that's pretty good. You know. Now, when we living off of these type of, this right here is an advantage. Okay, that's what I tell brothers. It's an advantage that we can utilize to live a pretty decent life in another country if you want to live there. But you got to have the U.S. dollar basically following you down there. Now, to a lot of brothers who've moved there, like I said, they're retirees. They are guys with decent 401ks or pensions, basically U.S. dollar following down, basically down there. Now, let's just say, let's take a very decent average of the type of money that you're definitely going to need to live in Brazil. I always say anywhere between 2,500 U.S. dollars a month, okay, to live in Brazil, okay. 2,500 US dollars a month. If you can keep a passive income that will follow you into Brazil, all right, of 2,500 US dollars a month, that comes out to just over 5,600 reais a month. Okay, subtract your rent, which is going to be probably another 2,000 reais, all right, and you're basically walking off with, let's just subtract 900. So let's just say 1,500, right? Rounding off terms. You're walking off with almost 3,400 reais, a month in spending money. Okay, that's after your rent's done. Okay, you know. Now, like I said, the largest cost to live in Brazil is of course, your room and board, your flat, your apartment, and electronics. Okay, electronics down there like TVs, computers, camera stuff, cell phones, pads, all that stuff. That is the highest expense. My suggestion is you bring that stuff with you. Okay, buy it all in the U.S. Never buy nothing down there. Buy it all in the U.S. and bring it with you. When I was in the airport, every time I went down to Brazil, I noticed that a lot of Brazilians was always had all these TVs and all these computers and all that stuff all stacked up coming out the luggage booth and everything like that. Because of course, in the U.S. we can buy this for 60% less. In Brazil, because of the taxes, their products are retail at 60% more than the U.S. All right, like for example, a 55-inch TV. Okay, 55-inch TV that's not a smart TV. Okay, well, a non-smart TV here in the U.S. would probably be, you get one for about a decent one for about $450, $400. Yeah, 450, 500, 55-inch. Okay, Sanyo or Vizio, something like that. Well, down in Brazil, that same TV will be about anywhere around 5,000 or 6,000 reais. Okay, keep in mind the average Brazilian, if he's working a good job, is probably only making 2,000 reais a month. So what I also noticed is that in their retail stores is that they got a lot of rent centers. What we call rent centers here is kind of what their appliance stores is kind of, average. They know that people are not going to have all the money up front, so they put them on a payment plan or everything like that, rent to own type of thing. All right. Because $6,000 TV is not going to be that simple to buy up front for the average Brazilian who works or an honest job. So a lot of them, who have relatives in the U.S. and everything like that, send them these products. Of course, when they come down to visit, they bring all these products with them. Okay. So like I tell people is if they're going to move to Brazil, make sure they bring electronics with them so they won't have to buy none down there. Okay, bring your computers, bring your TVs, bring your iPads. Okay, bring your iPhone or anything like that, whatever you may deal with or anything like that. That is one of the two highest commodities that you have to deal with in Brazil. Okay, electronics, one to three actually. Electronics, of course your room and board, and next is a car. Now we're gonna go into getting a car later on. Because really, for real, if you're living in Rio de Janeiro, you don't need a car. It's just like living in New York. Okay, they got cabs everywhere. Okay, and $20 can get you from one end of the city to the other with no problem. Depending upon traffic. Okay, but what I want to point out here, if you're living off of, like I said, 2,500 US dollars a month. You already paid for your rent. That could be anywhere between $700 to $1,000 US. All right. This leaves you with a nice piece of change right here. All right. That right there, 3,400 reais. All right. And you living off of let's just say 3,400 reais. I'm rounding off here, by the way. All right. So let's just say 3,400 reais divided by 4, which is 4 weeks. Okay. That comes out to $850, a week in your pocket. All right. Now, let's step a little money up here. All right. Let's say the average money that you would probably need to live an even better life. Let's put it up to about at least $3,500 a month. Oops, that's not too much. Okay. That comes out to near 8,000 reais a month. Okay. 78.90. All right, but I'm rounding off, so let's just say almost $8,000. 8,000 reais. Okay. All right, we paid about at least $1,000 for our rent. Okay. So that leaves us with 2,500. All right. And once again, that just brings us over 5,600 reais. Okay. 5,600 reais a month. All right. Of spending money. Okay. That's just straight up spending money. Okay. So let's just say 5635, and we divide that by 4. Okay. All right. That's 1,400 reais, just over 1,400 reais a week that you keep in your pocket. Okay. All right. That right there is pretty decent living because you already got your room, your apartment, your rent out the way for the month. All right. You already probably, if you're smart and if you listen to me, you already brought your own electronics. All right. So now the rest of that money is yours. You can spend it the way you like. Have a good time in Brazil. All right. Take a 400 reais plane ticket, fly to Salvador Bahia, or fly to Sao Paulo. All right. Enjoy yourself. Okay. As you can see, as long as we take advantage of the fact that the U.S. dollar is double the amount in Brazil, all right, you can live a very decent life. And that's why I'm preaching so much the word, so much the sentence, so much the adjective that I keep putting out, right, is passive income.